Welcome to Safe Environment Training 2018 in Juneau. And we're going to introduce ourselves. I'm Bridget Gertzen. I'm the DRE at the Cathedral. Most of you know me because you're all from the Cathedral. So that helps. And
my name is Kimber Watt, and I am the DRE down at St. Paul's.
And I'm Roberta Izzard. I'm the Victim Assistance Coordinator out of the Chancery Office. Thank you all for coming.
so, Robbie, did you want to do the overview of Safe Environment Training?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we want to give everybody tonight is an overview of what our offices do and how we work, how the Diocese Safe Environment Office works with all the parishes. And we require, ever since 2002, when Bishop Warfel went to Dallas and came home with our new requirements about having a safe environment office, we have now a Safe Environment Coordinator, which usually is the DRE in each one of our parishes. So we require anybody who works with youth at all to be trained in safe environment. That new people will have an initial training, and then every year we decided that we would give ongoing trainings, and that's what this training is. So if you're a catechist or a volunteer or a new employee, we expect you to come to our trainings every year. Often for new people, if you come in the middle of the year or miss out on an initial training, we have the state of Alaska has a mandatory reporter training, and we have it on our website. So we invite new people to go on and watch that, and we print out a certificate at the end. And it has pretty much all the information we want to know. And we consider all of our volunteers and all of our catechists mandatory reporters. We've just decided to do that. So you'll notice that when you came in, we hope everybody signed the sheet. Bridget has a code of conduct over there for people to sign, and there's 4 or 5 signature pages that say you agree to the code, you agree to have your background checked, and that you have not been convicted of any kind of a sex offense. So we do that training and that checking on everybody, and we hope people will volunteer to come to these trainings whether they're actually required to or not, because it's good information if you're a parent or just someone who has oversight over children in our parish. We want our parishes to be as safe as possible.
So safe environment practices can vary by parish, depending on, even just right down to how many classrooms you have, how many volunteers you have, how many children you have, what is the actual setup of your building. We put there are certain rules in place, like 2 adults per room at all times when in the presence of especially just one child. There definitely needs to be 2 adults in the room. That's just to keep you safe, keep them safe, make sure that everything is above board and that there's no question that that child is always taken care of properly. We say adult. A lot of times in our classrooms or our atria settings, we will also have young or youth who are 14 or older that also sign their own code of conduct. And they can volunteer and be that other adult in the room, and so they will get trained by the DRE appropriately, age-appropriate type of a training to be able to be in the room with all those children too. One of the things that we also do, and mainly is just so that we know that children are not alone with an adult. It's a good safe practice to have. So even right down to bathroom trips, sometimes that can be a place where it can be a busy place depending on the time of day or what's going on in your church at the time. So always making sure that an adult escorts a child to the bathroom, looks in the bathroom first, makes sure that there's no one else in the restroom, and then lets the child go in. And then you stand outside the door and wait, giving that child as much privacy as they need, and preventing anyone else from going in while the child is in there, especially other adults. You can ask them to wait or use another restroom. That's really important to give that child the privacy that they need. Also, we have sign-in and sign-out procedures here at the cathedral. When a child is dropped off with us, we make sure that the parent or guardian or whoever dropped them off signs them in. In the past, we've had people just, send their kids in, but then we are not sure who's supposed to pick them up and things like that. And it can be confusing for the child too, because if mom's late or dad's late, and then they don't know who is supposed to pick them up. It's a good record for us to have also as to who's responsible for that child that day. Also to make sure that they get signed out properly, and that person is the person that they were supposed to go with. And the sign in and sign out sheet is actually pretty critical during emergency situations too. You can grab that sheet, take it with you in an emergency so you know how many children you should have in your care if there's an evacuation of any kind. We also at the cathedral have hall security, which is parents who volunteer to sit in the hallway, and they have to undergo this mandatory training too. Everybody does. What they do is they sit in the hallway and they greet people that would like to enter our atria setting and screen them. Are they supposed to be there? Are they a parent that's there to pick up their child early, or just to observe, things like that. Anyone who is not a parent or guardian or known to the hall security person, they are just to wait outside the door, and that hall security person will come and get me, and then I will handle it. That just prevents people from coming in that should not be there, and sometimes it's hard to tell who's supposed to be there or not, and it prevents unfortunate instances where someone might just kind of walk in and want to be in a room with a bunch of kids, and that's not acceptable. So let's see, I think I did that one. Yeah, the hall security. Another thing that we try not to do with children, and I have done with parents, is give out my cell phone number. I will give a parent my cell phone number, but I would not do that if I was a youth leader, to give a child my cell phone number. It's inappropriate to have that one-on-one contact that cannot be viewed and shared. So it's better to always communicate in a broad spectrum, make sure that everybody, you have a CC, if there's other people involved in that conversation. We're protecting the children and we're protecting ourselves, and that's the whole point of making sure that we're doing this. One thing that I'm going to
sort of EC or what?
like a ASCC, making sure that there's more people included in the conversation. So it's not just a conversation,
okay.
Right? Like a carbon copy. Yeah, it's not just a conversation between the volunteer or catechist and the child. Always make sure that it's going to a parent also. One thing that we're going to do this year at the cathedral is something called Flock Note. I'm going to introduce that. Are you guys going to do that too?
We actually have been using it.
You have?
Mm-hmm.
Good. That's great.
Yeah,
I'll be
really
chatting you up.
Yes.
Chatting you up after this. Flock Note is actually, why don't you talk about Flock Note since you're using it?
Yeah, so
That'd be
it's
great.
a way to communicate that's all recorded. It goes through a website, Flocknote, or an app. And so instead of just sending a text, it will send kind of a message to everybody in the group that you're sending the message to. So for youth group, it's really handy, like if we're meeting at a different time or something, it can go to the kids' phones, but it's not coming directly from my phone or from my phone number. And then they can text it back, and it goes recorded into the Flock Note, and I can text it back from Flock Note. So, if they're like, oh, is it at 6 or 6:30 tonight, youth group, I can respond to them, but there's a record of that conversation. So it's really, really handy for that.
So you said it's a phone app?
Well, it texts their phones, but you can get it as an app, yeah, on yours.
How do you avoid not getting a bunch of weird texts?
So it's not like a phone number. It's a service that it will send to their phone numbers, but it's not from your phone number.
So if someone were to respond and text you back, they would be texting it to this server, and then you could retrieve that message either from your email or online.
Can you do it online?
Yes.
If you don't have a smartphone.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it
It sounds very
it's
similar to like Class Dojo.
It's almost
sort of. I see, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
we
a
have
lot
that
like
too.
that.
No, it's
So
more of a
there's a rec-
safety issue.
The
That
point
way
is, I think there's a record of
everybody
this.
Yes.
gets
Of
that
the conversation.
Yes.
Not
That way.
Yeah, it's not just like a
it's not
text on your phone that you
one-on-one,
complete and then
one
it's
person
done.
to the child.
It's recorded and it's not going, you know, from your phone to the child's
And you
phone.
can check it when you want. It's not like, it's, you turn your, you know, if you have that app, you can turn off,
The notifications.
and then you can check it, you can check it at your will.
I don't want to be the only one.
And it's really user friendly, so.
Especially since I don't really like technology. I'm
Yeah.
actually looking forward to this because I think it'll be easy for me to use. Technology and I don't usually go hand in hand.
Yeah.
You said it's a phone app.
Yeah.
Well, I
use
use it on
similar-
my computer.
We
And
use a
you
similar
can-
system.
It
for
texts
football.
their phone though, yeah.
And I think the end user can decide how they get their
Yep,
messages.
Right.
you can go
You can
email.
decide whether, if you're on the group, then you can decide whether you get text on your phone or
Or
an email sent to you.
Okay.
Another concern is emergency practices, and that's something that I really want to do this year is make sure that we are practicing what to do, where to meet during a evacuation for a fire. You know, just making sure that we as catechists, you know, also know what do we do in case of an earthquake. Also, unfortunately, this is happening around our country, but you know, intruder situations. Here at the cathedral, we decided to invite an officer to the parish and walk around and talk about our areas that might be vulnerable, things to consider, especially with children in a situation like that. We're very fortunate already downstairs where the children are. Each door of our atria, and actually most of the doors down there, aside from mine because it has a key lock, you can lock the door and close it, and it won't open from the outside, but it will always open from the inside to let somebody out. So in an emergency of an intruder, that door will shut, you will shut that door, and they cannot get in. And you can go out, and all the windows on one side of the building have breakaway windows that you can use during a fire or any kind of intruder situation. On this side of the building, we have spaces, we have a closet in the level 2 atria that we have found is very well secured. So we would be fine there with children until help arrived. But it's a really good idea that as you're spending time in your parish, that you look around and you see and you think about those things. And so for anyone who's going to watch this from another parish in the Southeast, take that time. Just invite an officer to come around and just look at your vulnerable areas. And you can brainstorm some ways to kind of combat that and be as safe as possible.
So we had last year an inebriated person come in and sit down and use the cell phone. And it's hard to get rid of her.
Very hard.
So what you do is, I mean, and sometimes it's hot, so the door's open. So as I work as a hall monitor, that's my first option.
Right, so if you are the hall monitor for that day, or any catechist or anything, first of all, make sure that none of the children are in immediate danger. That is our first concern. After that, you can kind of decide whether it's going to be easy enough to get that person to just ask them to leave. If that doesn't work, make sure that someone notifies your DRE or your head catechist at the time, and we will call the police. There is just no reason to put up with that at all. We have had a couple of people that have just stayed and been quite combative, and we were very lucky in those times because we did have a really good hall monitor that wouldn't let anyone through those doors and monitored the situation until it was rectified. So it's unfortunate depending on, like I say, where your parish is. Everybody kind of has their own situation or things that have happened. But it's always good to make sure that all of our catechists are well trained in what to do and how to assess the situation.
Emergency practices.
Oh, we forgot to say the first aid kit. Also make sure you know where your first aid kit is and that it's not in a locked room. We have known that from experience.
Yeah.
So
And
maybe
where
have
is-
multiple first aid kits in each room. That would always be a nice practice to have.
In St. Paul's, we keep small first aid kits in the rooms, in the classrooms, and then I have like a bigger first aid kit in my office, just so that then if someone's going into my office to get the first aid kit, I can call the parents and say, hey, here's what's going on, if it's something more than a Band-Aid.
And maybe we should check on first aid kits.
I did, yeah. I'm gonna get some new Band-Aids. Ours are losing their sticky. I think they're from 1984. Sorry.
That's good.
Yeah. Haven't had to use them.
All right, so our next topic is reporting abuse. If all of us are mandatory reporters, then the question is if we suspect something is going on with the child, or if a child actually comes to us and gives us information to indicate that they're being harmed anywhere, we are expected to report that. We're to report it within 24 hours. This is a state of Alaska mandate. And if you see something or suspect something, say something to somebody. And if you don't feel comfortable reporting it, you can report it either to Health and Social Services. In fact, I have this hopefully is posted in all of the parishes, and I have copies of this handout over there on the table about how to report any kind of misconduct. And it's got my name and number on there, Father Pat's name and number, and also the Health and Social Services 24-hour hotline, and that's 465 number here in Juneau. And call it, or talk to, if you're a catechist or a volunteer, talk to the DRE. Bring it to the priest. You certainly are within your rights to report it directly to the police if you want to, but if you're not comfortable doing that, bring it to somebody in authority, because these things do need to be reported, and then we let the authorities work it out. The police know the people at DHSS, and they work together, so either person that you report it to, they're going to work together, and they'll find out whether this is, it's their job to investigate it. It's not our job to decide whether something is credible. It's our job to, if we have any suspicion at all, report it to the professionals and let them deal with it. And even if it does turn out not to be, a big deal, it's easily rectified, and that's much better than letting something slip through the cracks. Because the truth is, at Health and Social Services, they have to have a good number of complaints before they can actually intervene. So if you have any sense at all that something's wrong, something's not right, if you have a child with bruises or a child who talks to you about fears or any complaints that make you suspicious, let people know. Turn it over. I've had to help people try and retrieve people out of unsafe households, and the first thing the police and Health and Social Services will say is, we've had no complaints. Even though people that I knew of many other times when things should have been reported. They have to have some sense that there is something going on. And if it turns out to be someone where there isn't a problem, then that will resolve itself right away. So it's a serious and an important responsibility that we take to be the caretakers of the children. So again, that middle table over there is resources out of my office. How to report sexual misconduct. Please take one if you don't have it. And most of the materials on that table are things that I loan out to people like Kimber and Bridget to use to teach in their classes. And a lot of that is material to be used with the children or to be used in presentations like this, where we're trying to educate catechists, volunteers, and parents. And I would hope that all of our parishioners would be involved in helping us maintain a safe environment.
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
Just because I've been doing this. The reminder that we're not the investigators.
No.
We're not supposed to ask leading questions
Thank you.
and try to figure out if there's something really happening. We are just mandatory reporters.
Right.
If we suspect something, we have to say something.
Particularly don't
But
grill
we're
the
not the
child.
investigators. We're not supposed to lead the child.
Particularly, don't go with child.
Yeah.
Yes,
Don't
particularly
do
do
it.
not ask any leading questions. If they want to volunteer, they've probably got to that point on their own, and probably a little nervous about it. If you start grilling them, they could clam up. You could also cause a little more trauma to them than they are, something like what they are already experiencing. The other thing I would say about this is, as part of that see something, say something, is even if we are all working together, you notice something, or a volunteer, or even a catechist, or your priest, anyone, maybe doing something with a child that seems odd or too familiar, go ahead and say something about it to them right away. End it. You know, for example, tickling a child. If you see that someone is tickling a child and that child is obviously not comfortable with that, you could say something like, I think the child is finished with that now. And be firm and be done with it. And then follow up later, but not in front of the child. The other thing is when you are listening to a child, you really just have to be quiet and let them talk. It's really important that they are able to say what they need to say.
Don't react, don't respond, don't get upset on their
Right.
behalf. The Child Advocacy Center will tell you that if they do remove a child and want to speak to them, they have professionals who know exactly how to talk to children. And they don't want that child who've already had to tell their story 2 or 3 times before they get to the person who knows how to let them speak without traumatizing them. So we don't want to run that.
Question, if a child comes to you and talks about something and says, I don't know what to do,
Well, then you tell them that they came to the right person and that,
Thank you for telling me.
yeah, we appreciate it. Yeah.
And I'm going to tell someone.
Yes.
Okay.
And you make no promises about keeping secrets. That should never come out of your mouth. You never say, I promise not to tell someone. And you never say, I'm going to fix this either, because you are not in control of that. So that's another thing.
I brought that up because you say you don't respond, but if a child
You
says,
can validate their feelings,
Yeah.
but you don't have an emotional response.
Right.
Because even if you're showing any kind of upset response and you're not upset at the child at all, you're upset at the person who's hurting
The
them,
situation.
the child can't always tell who you're upset at. So they think, oh, I shouldn't have said anything, now I'm in trouble. And it really shuts them
And
down.
they'll watch you very carefully
Yes.
for a response, and they want to know that you're okay here, whatever it is they're going to say.
Now, on the subject of, I gave you the example of tickling or things like that. When we are in the atria, especially in the level 1 atrium or in a classroom with very young children, a lot of times they just like to snuggle up with you when you're sitting on the floor having prayer service, or they just want to sit on your lap, or they want to hug you. The guideline for that is if the child initiates that contact and you are in a room with other adults and you're not alone, as long as you can ask the child to sit next to you and leave it at that, because you don't want to hurt the child's feelings, but to know you also want to let the child know what is an appropriate contact in this instance. So you're setting your healthy boundaries and the child is being receptive of those healthy boundaries too. So that's mainly for our level 1 youngest children, because they're so loving.
So just kind of an addendum to that, my little granddaughter is very huggy and very kisses and hugs total strangers. So on that note, I am trying to teach her boundaries, but what would you say to her that, that just, she's doing better, but
Right,
I mean,
right. I've been on the receiving end of tons of her love and
Yeah.
affection.
Yeah.
What I have started doing with her, I have started asking her first if she would like a hug. And I ask her to ask me now, can you ask me for a hug? And I'm usually always around other people when this is happening, so I feel okay
say
with
ask
that.
permission.
Yes,
Yeah.
it teaches
Yeah.
her to set her own boundaries.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we are demonstrating that boundary, she's receptive to that.
Gives her permission to have
Right.
a boundary.
And
So,
she's learning from that herself, so that's always a good.
So it's just kind of a look
Conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, let's see. Oh, we kind of talked So one of the things that we wanted to let parents and volunteers know is how we talk to the children in the atrium and the classroom setting about their safe boundaries and who to talk to, things like that. So we do a yearly meeting with the children. We just set aside one classroom period a year to kind of talk about what is a safe environment and do you feel safe? So depending on the age of the child, I know that in the atria here at the cathedral, we have our children separated out between 3 to 6 years old, 6 to 9 years old, and 9 to 12 years old. So there's a mix of ages and different understandings of, how these things go about. And, you might have one child in an atria that knows a little bit more than the younger child. And so we try to keep it on a level plane so that it's direct. For our level 1 children, we like to use the book, The Berenstain Bears Talk About Strangers. It helps them understand their own boundaries, maybe some boundaries that they didn't think they should have when it comes to people that they don't know, but to also be trusting of people that they do know, that are their safe people. The conversation always has to end with something a little more joyful, but to always think about who are your safe people. And you don't have to have them tell you who they are, although the level 1 children always want to tell you who all their safe people are, right off the bat, and so that's great. So for that age group, you're really looking to show them and to have a conversation with them about how do you stay safe. So we do that with them. I love that book. It works really well. We do have other materials that we can use. We can alternate years. For our 6 to 12-year-olds, in the atria, we do a kind of a Bible study meditation on a maxim called Your Body is the Temple of the Holy Spirit. And it promotes a discussion about how to keep our bodies holy because they are the temple of God too. And how we can treat other people in the same way, to treat them as if their body is the holy temple of God. So it helps to create those natural boundaries. And again, we always make sure that before that session is over, that they have thought about who their safe people are. And if they need help with suggestions, we can throw some out there. But a lot of times I think the children have always come out and wanted to have a nice group discussion about who their safe people are. A lot of times the discussion turns to bullying, and so we can discuss that too at the time. But it's really, at that age group, it's kind of child-led because they're figuring it out for themselves and they have really good instincts. And in that environment, they're able to talk to each other, and it really does help. So I'm not a youth leader for high school, but we do have plenty of resources for high school students and middle school students talking about safe boundaries, recognizing sexual abuse, recognizing their own development, and how to stay safe at an age when things are moving quickly in the world. So we do have a lot of resources on that too that I would use if I was doing high school youth group. So,
And we've done stuff on bullying.
Yes.
we have done stuff on bullying.
And
Other
those are some of
resources
the-
that
Those are some of the resources that I have over there are DVDs, new ones come out every year on internet safety, on bullying, on peer pressure. This Breaking the Silence is a lot about peer pressure. And there's just some excellent films out there to be conversation starters, to show to middle school and high school age kids and give them something to talk about. And they do all want to tell their stories.
Yes. Does anyone have any questions about how to talk to the children in the atria setting? About what should be covered, not covered?
You started to say some of that, and you just missed it. I didn't know. Maybe I'm going off. Say,
We can talk later too. If that,
Okay.
yeah, if it
yeah,
comes to you.
I'll do that.
Yeah, Ellen.
This might answer it too.
Yes. Ellen, Ellen, did you have a question?
I do, but it's about what we were talking about before, about letting people in. Can I ask
Yeah,
about
absolutely,
that?
absolutely.
So as somebody that might not know people that are coming in, how it's, like, is there a protocol that maybe I'm not aware of that you would say, can you please tell me your name?
Sure.
Like, I can make an assumption that maybe that person doesn't belong in there, but if it is a parent, obviously I want to be friendly, or if it is someone that's supposed to pick somebody up. But when I'm in that position, sometimes I don't know.
Right.
So, Ellen, you weren't here quite yet. We have that sign-in protocol, so the person that signed the kid in can pick them up.
Okay.
If it's somebody else, you have to have them wait and then come get the DRE to make the determination.
Right, and you can always ask someone for their name. I usually would start with, oh, excuse me, do you have a child in here? And if they say no, then you say, oh, then you must be looking for another part of the building. If they say yes, then you can say, can you hold on just a minute? Can I have your name and what child are you looking for? And just ask them to just wait until you come and get me, especially if you don't know who they are.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
I was unaware that, I know probably most of the time, I didn't sign Kate in. So
Mhm.
that's something that maybe Paul monitor.
Right.
And also, I sometimes sat out here instead of in the double door,
Right.
So that's something to, for Paul.
I think from the
Right.
experience I've had from last year is that we do need to make sure we're signing it.
Right,
Yeah.
and a lot of times I see the children come in and I see who they come with, and I'll sign them in myself and who dropped them off. So I usually, you'll see on the sheet sometimes, it's mainly my handwriting, because I see them come in. So I write it down if the parent has left before they have signed it. But I try to make sure that even before we start our atria session, I have gone through every room to see which children are there, and I check the sign-in sheet before I start usually, so. Yeah, so does that answer your question okay?
Yeah, it does.
All right.
Thank you.
Perfect. So we kind of talked about what it's like to be a catechist and talking to children who may be volunteering information about their own problems or issues that they may be experiencing. Another aspect of this is how do we talk to our children, our own children, about these issues, about abuse, especially in the environment that we've had the last few weeks with a lot of the revelations of cover-ups and things like that in our own hierarchy. We want to honor the children, especially the ones that are old enough to understand what is going on. To use it in plain language, let the child lead the conversation, because a lot of times children hear things but they don't exactly know what they're hearing, or they don't understand it. And if you volunteer too much information, you might traumatize them a little bit farther, because they might not have been there, like they didn't really understand what they were hearing. And sometimes you could volunteer a little too much information and it actually scares them. Let the child lead the conversation. Reaffirm what is right and what is wrong. But at the same time, you don't want to use language that could be scary to them. High school students obviously are going to know a little and understand a little bit more about what's going on. Middle school students, I haven't had anyone ask me. I have a high school student. She and I talked about it. She heard about it. She wanted to know what it meant, and I just let her kind of ask the questions, and I answered them. And that's what she wanted. She wanted her questions answered, and so that's what I did. For younger children, like I say, they really don't understand so much of what is going on necessarily. So it's really good to just listen to what they have to say and reaffirm the difference between right and wrong, and honesty and things like that. So that's mainly what they need to hear. But again, don't say too much, because you don't want to traumatize a child, because their little brains are going a million miles an hour, and they can really take off with an idea and then not talk to you about that. So add to that.
Yeah, I think just making sure you stay as positive as possible so you're not frightening them is the biggest thing.
So our next topic is, what does a victim assistance coordinator do? And that's my job. Why do we have one, and how do you contact one? And I showed you the flyer on how to get a hold of me. I have an email and a phone number, and I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime. The victim assistance coordinator, like the safe environment coordinator, was a position that was created back in 2002. And Bishop Warfel asked me if I would do that. He knew that I was already working as a volunteer peer counselor with people with childhood abuse issues, and I had a degree in counseling psychology. And it was an area that I was interested in already. And so we do have one. Every diocese in the country has a victim assistance coordinator, and our contact information should be very easy for people to get a hold of. And I'm certainly somebody that you could call if you have somebody you want to refer to me. I've had people brought into my office by good friends. Very often that's how people come. Sometimes they'll call, sometimes they'll send an email, sometimes they'll just want some more information. But if anyone says to you, you know, maybe I should see a victim coordinator or hear something that happened to me that had to do with personnel in the church, feel free to bring them to me or have them call me, or somehow, you know, come. My office is full of resources. I will put them in contact with the next best resource that they need. I've been known to put women in my car and drive them directly to the Aware Shelter. Whatever it is that they're looking for, that's what I hope I have. I have resources for particularly people who, as adults, will say they realize they were abused as children and they want to tell someone about that. They want to report that, particularly if it had to do with someone associated with our diocese. But even if it didn't, I am most happy to hear their story. Very often people will come up with these things that they want to talk to somebody years later, and they no longer live where it happened. But they can still come to me and tell me their story, and I will either put them in contact with the person where it happened, or help walk them through it until they will get some satisfaction from people that work for the church. We want people to know that we are sorry if anything has happened to anyone, and we will do everything we can to make it right. And particularly if there's anything that's going on right now. This position was created for victims of childhood sexual abuse, but I've also had people who felt like they had been victimized in a number of different ways, and I'm happy to talk to anybody. I keep resources. I have a full library for people suffering from any form of childhood trauma. I refer them on to groups and support services, and I have a list of counselors in town, and I know who is experts in these fields. We have a full library. We have a couple of big floor-to-ceiling bookcases full of materials for people who were abused or people who came from a variety of traumatizing backgrounds. And I have counselors all over town who send clients to me because we have such a wonderful resource. And I also serve on the Sexual Abuse Review Board, which is an advisory board to the bishop. So if anybody comes to him or to anybody in our office with a complaint against someone, we take all that information to this board of professionals who give us advice about what to do next. And I'm sort of the liaison between the bishop's office and that board. I make sure that we do have safe environment programs in all of our parishes. I make sure we have resources to give out to the DREs to do the trainings. This is the time of year we do trainings. September before school starts. Make sure that we have important information out in all of our parishes. I have a number of reports that I do every year because let people know that we're doing what we said we would do. So I collect that information from the parishes and pass it on. So if you have know of anybody with any questions, children, youth, or vulnerable adults. And we also work with people in that field. Or if you have anyone who you think would make good use of the Safe Environment Office, call me or ring me.
I was gonna ask you guys to do the safe environment, I mean, this safe environment now, but, the one, you do it at the end of the year, the one with the Berenstain Bears?
Sometimes it ends up at the end of the year, just depends on when we.
Is it called safe environment
Mhm.
also? Okay.
Yeah, sometimes we do it at the end of the year, and sometimes we remember to do it earlier. What
Okay.
happens is we get into Advent, and then we get into Lent, and then we're like, oh my gosh, we never did the safe environment talk.
Spring break.
So, and then it's spring
Okay.
break, and
So it's
yeah.
not a, because I, you know.
Doesn't have to be done at a certain time.
Okay.
No,
So
but
that-
I would prefer to do it earlier.
Right. Catechists are required to, whatever class they're teaching, to do a safe environment component sometime during the year. And then there's a report about what they did that comes back to me, so that we know that not only were all of you trained, but that you turned around and trained your children. And to make sure that our full-time ministers, which is anybody who works for the church, including our DREs, get ongoing training. We have, thanks to Father Pat Casey, there's a program called Virtus, which does monthly ongoing trainings, and they've been doing this since 2002. And so we email these out to the DREs, who can make them available then to their parents, their catechists, and their volunteers. So we not only train everybody every year after the initial training, we also try and do monthly update trainings. And sadly, the information keeps changing. And so how we have to adapt to create safe environments, so we have to keep upping our game as we go along.
And that's fundamentally.
That's what.
And I have, I do keep copies of those in my office in a binder. If anybody wants access to that, you are more than welcome to it, and you can read through it, make a copy if you like to take home with you. I try to forward it if I get it on email to my catechists. Sometimes I'm not great about remembering to do that because I'm usually reading it on the fly on my phone. But if you ever want to flip through those and see what kind of information that it does provide, feel free, just let me know. I'm happy to make copies and hand those out.
Do, kind of a dumb question, I think, but do we get like a certificate every time we attend one of these trainings? And the reason I ask is I'm trying to get St. Paul Street evangelization going, and I finally, I just need to write to the bishop and get a packet going, but,
So I can write a letter for you.
okay.
I forwarded the stuff last
Same.
time.
Yeah, you did, but
Yes,
I
same
didn't
with
know
Heather.
whether we needed a new renewal every year. I mean, obviously we do because we're here, but,
Right, I keep track of that.
okay.
I keep track of all the trainings that happen, and I update it every year. I mainly just update the person. I don't necessarily save a lot of the archived information because I printed that out and filed it. So I kind of have a living document on my
So
computer.
basically, if I needed another proof that.
Absolutely, you can
Okay.
just come to me and I will provide that. And
It
I,
has something to do with the church.
Just
Right.
be sure to hand in your packet.
yes, so, and that's the other thing. Part of that, that keeping track is making sure that I get the packet back that you have, signing all the code of conduct, all of the appendices, yes, the background check information, also saying that you have not been convicted of a crime that had anything to do with domestic violence and sexual abuse. So I need all those back because I keep track of each one of those that you sign also. And so it's really important. And then I also keep track of the last time we did a background check on all of you. We do it every couple years, unless there's a reason for us to dig any further. If we feel like we need to dig any further, then you've signed that paper so we can.
So it says, I hereby acknowledge that I read the Code of Pastoral Conduct for Clergy. Is that, it's over there?
I have copies of it over here. They are also available online at the diocese website. There are copies over there, and if you would like to take a copy home with you, I can always make more copies. It's not a problem.
Yeah, we keep them in our office, so.
I have multiple copies in my office. In my office, yes.
But you said it's on the diocese.
It is on the diocese website. Yeah. And the mandatory reporter training, we want to make sure that everybody remembers that if you are especially a first-time volunteer here, that you do the State of Alaska Department of Health and Social Services mandatory reporter training. And you will be able to print your certificate, and it's going to look like this. And you're going to have to scale it down before you print it. It took me a few tries to get it that small. And then, remember to put your name in here. I forgot. It says, type your name here, and I forgot, and I printed it, so that's my new name. So if you will do that and get it back to me, it takes about 45 minutes, just to make sure that, because I will keep those on file.
And it's a one-time thing.
One time.
Sorry, I was
that's it.
busy filling this out. Where?
This one is the State of Alaska Department of Health and Social Services. The link is on our diocese website also. And you just do it's kind of a self-led training online, and you print a certificate at the end.
You said first-time volunteer. I don't know that I've ever.
You haven't done one of these? Well, you started back when I wasn't here, I wasn't DRE yet. So if you didn't, then
Katie was.
yeah, Katie was. So if you could do this, then that would be great, and I'll just keep it
Health
on
and
file.
Social Services.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Does anyone
It's not a
else?
big color.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay.
As long as I see your name and the date that you completed it.
Okay.
And it puts the date in for you, so you don't have to worry about that.
I'm sorry, what's it under? Health and safety?
It's on our website.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
on the
okay.
diocese website. Mhm.
So I can do
There's
that.
there's a link to it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I did find it kind of timed me out a couple times when I got interrupted to go do something else today, but I was able to get back in and keep going. The only time it doesn't let you back in is when you go to print your certificate and you go back to put your name in it. It's gone. So don't just make sure you print something before you get off the website there. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Just Diocese of Juneau, is that the
Website.
website?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Well, I would like to close with a prayer. First, we always start the normal way. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Dear God, we ask you to help all those who suffer from abuse. Help them find healing and peace in their life. May Maria Goretti, who is strengthened by your grace, join with us in prayer for healing of all victims of abuse, particularly those abused as children or young adults. Grant us your love that we might reach out to them in your name with hope in times of trial. As Maria prayed for her attacker, grant us the grace to pray for the true conversion of all involved with the abuse, that they might seek your mercy through prayer and penance. Loving God, pour into our hearts and lives your healing spirit, that the sacredness of every human person might be respected and protected as the gracious image of God. Help us to live in the peace which Maria Goretti found in Christ and in the love of his mother Mary. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.